So let's have a look at some really simple color grading. Now with Premiere Pro you can get really advanced, there's lots of great plugins, but what I want to show you is a way to make your video look really good, really quick. So we're going to look at importing footage, and then we're going to go through these processes of basic correction. We're going to look at creative controls, we're going to look at curves, color wheels, and vignette. Now, when we look at these, we might think this sounds really complicated and really advanced, but it isn't. You'll see as we go through, that as long as you follow along with what I do, at the end of this, you'll be able to color grade your own video footage and create some really nice looking video to share. So what we need to do now is bring our raw footage in. So the raw footage is the footage we recorded. So what we're going to do is find wherever that is, and then we're just going to drop that into our original footage folder. And this is just a way of us backing up our original footage. Now I've just dropped one piece of footage in, but if you had multiple clips and sections of recording, you would drop all of those in. Once we've done that, we can close our original source. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take our original footage and we're going to drop it into our project folder, but we're just going to drag it from here and drop it here. So now we have our original footage here, but we still don't have anything showing over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag it now and we're going to drop it onto our editing window. So I know that seems a bit complex because you've gone from one to the other and then you've done all that, but follow that path through, because what that's going to do is enable that you've got backups and everything's safe, and you're not going to lose footage and you're not going to record it in the wrong places. So now we're here, we need to do some simple color grading. We've got our footage. We don't want to chop all this up and then color grade it afterwards. So what we're going to do, because this is all one piece of footage, it's all been recorded in the same place, my color grading is going to apply to the whole video length. Now if you're recording lots of different scenes from different locations with different light, you would have to duplicate this for each of the pieces of footage, the original footage you drop in onto your timeline, and this is your timeline. So what we're going to do is we're going to move backwards and forwards with the scrubber until we find a place where we can start working on our color grading. Now don't worry about this little box up here in the screen. If that's confusing you, that's just a frames per second count. This is a new version of Adobe, and they've decided to put that in there whether we like it or not. And I'll figure out how to turn it off eventually, but just ignore that for now. So what we're going to do is come over here to our Lumetri color. And that's just a really fancy way of saying color grading. So how do we start? Well, what we do is we're just going to start from the top and work our way down. And we're going to click on one, it's going to expand. So the first thing we're going to do is set our white balance. So let's set our white balance. Let's find a white area on the screen. Click that. And that's going to tell Premiere Pro that this is where the white balance is. So we've set our white balance. That was nice and easy. The next thing we're going to look at after that is we're going to come down and we're going to see we've got exposure is our next button. We're not going to touch this because we did that automatically. So we're not going to touch temperature and tint. Sometimes if it doesn't quite work it out, you can move these backwards and forwards, but I wouldn't recommend you do that. I'd recommend that you take the settings as they are. Now, what I'd like to do personally is I record slightly darker, slightly underexposed, because I'm using a white background. And I want that white to be fully white whenever I render it at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase the exposure a little bit. And that's going to make sure my whites are white. Next thing I'm going to come to is contrast. I'm going to put a little bit of contrast on, but I'm not going to go crazy with it. And what contrast does, it just pulls the whites and blacks apart. And the reason I'm not going to use it too much is because I actually use these controls to create my own contrast. Now, highlights are the whitest part on the screen. We're not going to worry about those because I've already increased my exposure. I don't want to increase highlights. That's going to make the whites even brighter than they already are. Next, I'm going to come to my shadows. My shadows are sort of my mid colors. And what I want to do, I want to take that down a little bit and create a little bit of depth in my mid colors. And then I'm going to come to my blacks. I'm going to skip over whites, which are slightly lower than highlights. I'm going to come to blacks and I'm going to put a little bit of black in there, and that's going to give me the contrast that the contrast button would have tried to do by itself, but this way I get to control that. So let's now move down to creative. And one of the things I like to do, faded film is just an effect, basically a filter. I wouldn't use that. I'm going to come to sharpen, and I'm just going to unsharpen a tiny bit. Now the reason I do that is because I want to soften the skin a little bit. I don't want the blemishes to appear, so I'm just going to take the sharpness down a tiny bit, and then I'm going to take the vibrance up. Now vibrance and saturation are slightly different. If you adjust saturation, which is the slider below, what's going to happen is it's going to take all the colors and increase them. But what vibrance is going to do is going to take the muted colors in the scene and it's going to pull those up without pulling up the brightest colors. So it essentially just pulls up the underperforming colors a little bit without overpowering the shot by pulling up the strong colors. So we're not going to touch saturation. We're going to add a little bit of vibrance. And then we're going to come down to our curves. Now, we're going to ignore this. We're not going to touch this, but we are going to use this. Now, one of the issues that I have, because I'm recording in a green screen studio, is I get a little bit of a green on my skin. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select 2 points, and now I'm going to drag the greens, as you can see, and I'm going to move that around until the green starts disappearing completely from my face. So about here, between the greens and the yellows, we're losing the green tint to my face. But we don't want to have such a dramatic effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring that in. We're going to bring that back in. And that's going to narrow the area that we're working on. But because we opened it up at the beginning and then dragged it around, we could eliminate the green exactly. Now once we've got that, let's pull that in. Let's pull it in nice and tight. Got those in. And then all I'm going to do now is just pull that off a little bit, because all I did was I used that to see the point of no saturation. And then I'm just going to ease that off. Now another issue I have with my own skin is it is a little bit orange. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull it off until I find the orange hot spots, which are around here, as you can see. Now I'm going to bring you back in here, same process, same principle, and then I'm just going to ease it off a little bit. And this allows me to make some really quick changes to the image. Now, I'll always grade for the color of skin before anything else in the image, because that's where the attention is going to be. So now we can see in that image, we've taken a little bit of the green out, a little bit of red. In fact, I'm going to take a little bit more of that green out. And you'll notice in the spectrum, we're only taking a specific green. So other greens and other yellows will survive. So now we've done that, let's move down to our color wheels. Now our color wheels allow us to change the color balance of our shadows, highlights, and midtones. So in this instance, if I'm not happy with how that green has been removed from my skin, I could actually just use this to remove some green. Now I've got two controls. I've got brightness and darkness, so I can turn my shadows up and down here. And then I've got shadows, midtones, and highlights. Well, I know that this is in the shadow area of my face, so I'm dealing with shadows. Let's just say I want to take a little bit more green just out of the shadows. I click the center, and what I want to do is I want to move away from the green. So all I've got to do, if I want to remove, I know my green cast is around here because of the other color wheel. So if I move away towards the other side, just in my midtones now, I'm going to take that green and I'm just going to lessen it a little bit more by using this tool. So the way you can use this is if you've taken a shot and there's a really strong color cast from an orange light on someone's face, and you can pull the oranges away a little bit, or like in this instance where I've used it, you can pull the greens and soften them a little bit and take the color balance across to the other side. Then you're going to see this, which is a hue, saturation, and luminosity secondary tool. Now I would just skip straight past this. This is quite complex, it's quite advanced, and you don't need it for this coarse. Then we're going to come to vignette. Now vignette is basically the ability to darken the edge or lighten the edge. So you can put a black vignette or a white vignette on your video production. When would you use that? The reason you might do that is you've got the subject in the center of the frame and you want to darken the edges just to bring the focus onto that person. Or maybe you want to create a dreamy look with a white vignette and it's a bridal shot. You might pull the white across. So basically you've got blacks this way, whites this way. So if we wanted to add black, we'd do that. And then the midpoint is going to be how close to the middle is it? Just reset that. And we've got roundness. Do we want it to be square or round? And then we've got feather. Do we want it to be really hard or really soft? So with all things in the color correction, double click to reset them. Pull the sliders and play with it, but work down. The big changes are at the top, and then by the time you get to the bottom, you should be working on smaller, fine-tuned changes. But that is a really simple, quick color grade.